Welcome to another episode of Heartland Cycling Network. Today my guests are a couple of e-bikes because we're going to be talking about e-bikes today. I know some people call them cheater bikes. Not necessarily the case. Those people that actually are using them really have some valid reasons. But anyhow, e-bikes happen to be one of the fastest growing segments in the cycling industry. For example, last year, Canada and US sales were just over 900,000 e-bikes. In 5 years from now, they estimate that over 2 million bikes will be sold. E-bikes will be sold, just e-bikes themselves. A standard definition of an e-bike is something that the federal government has actually initiated, but Nebraska is still a little bit behind the times right now. There is a bill that was just introduced in committee, LB 738, which will actually put the definition of e-bikes in harmony in Nebraska with the federal government. And what that means is that an e-bike is defined by a bicycle that has a motor battery. The motor would be 750 watts or less. Okay, and there's three classes of e-bikes. Class 1 is pedal assist only, up to 20 miles an hour. So in other words, once they get to 20 miles an hour, the motor will stop assisting. That does not mean that you have to stop at 20 miles an hour. You can still pedal faster and still propel the bike much faster than 20 miles an hour. Class 2 is pedal assist or throttle. And what that means is that there's actually a throttle on the bike where you can twist and actually propel the bike without pedaling. Okay, this really comes in handy at times when you're at a stop and you want to get going, or you want a little oomph going up a hill. So that's where pedal assist actually comes in. Again, that class 2 bike actually also stops at 20 miles an hour. Then there's a class 3 e-bike. And a class 3 e-bike is a pedal assist only e-bike, and that one will assist up to 28 miles an hour and then stop. And you'll find those more on some of the road bikes, which are much lighter in weight, and they're designed to go a little bit faster, obviously. So why should you consider buying an e-bike? Well, if you have physical limitations. I know people that have knee problems, and there's other problems where they just can't ride a regular bicycle, and they may need a little bit of assistance. Well, an e-bike is a perfect answer for them. I mean, there may be some joint issues, what have you, or heart problems. They're also easier to ride. I mean, when you're riding an e-bike, it does help. It's not as strenuous as a regular bike, but you still get physical exercise out of it. So you're still going to get some cardio work out of it. And it's all up to you as to what kind of assistance you want to give when you go out and ride. And people use e-bikes for transportation. I know that I've used my e-bike, a number of times to go out grocery shopping. Go out to the grocery store, pick up the groceries that I need, and bring it back. It's an alternative to a car. And so it's really great that way. And you can probably pedal longer. There's sometimes people can ride longer with an e-bike than they could on a regular bike. And it also helps them to keep up with a group ride. Let's say you're out with a group and they're going 15, 20 miles an hour, and you have problems trying to keep up with them. Well, with an e-bike, you're going to have be able to do that. And also, one of the things my wife really hates about the area that we live in is some of the hills that she has to go on with the bike. Well, an e-bike, there's no problem with the hills. They're almost like they're not there. You can ramp up the assist level, or if you have a class 2, hit the throttle. And there's different assist levels. My wife's e-bike, for example, has 3 assist levels. Mine has 4. So there's some that have 5. There's a lot of different, and each time there's an assist level, that means that more energy is going to be expended by the motor to help you go faster or get up that hill. So that's what the assist actually will do. And besides the fact that they're just plain fun to ride. I have a blast when I go out on my e-bike sometimes. It just gives you that experience and that freedom. It's just lovable. Okay, piece of advice that I've seen, that I've read a number of times, that I've heard on different groups when I've been doing research, is that you should buy your second e-bike first. Okay, what does it mean? There's too many people that I know that have gone about and bought an e-bike only to figure out it was the wrong one. Then they have to go out and buy another one. That gets kind of expensive. These things are not, priced like a regular bike. They're obviously, with a battery and a motor, they're going to be more expensive. What I say is you should start at a local bike shop, and there's a number of the major bike brands all have e-bikes. There's some e-bike specific shops that are in the area, so check them out. And the idea is they'll ask you lots of questions. They'll take and find out what your intended use of it is. Are you going to be doing road rides? Are you going to be taking and doing, like paved trail or dirt trail? Are you going to be doing gravel, dirt kind of runs? Are you actually going to be doing mountain biking? Yes, there are e-bikes that are mountain bikes. Okay, they're also going to take and size that bike for you, so you're going to get the right size. And that is a key factor to make sure that you have the maximum comfort on the bike. And then there is weight capacities on the bike. And they're usually defined as weight with the bike and the rider and anything else that you're carrying, or the bike can carry this amount of extra weight. So it depends. So those are the things that they'll ask you, but you can take and ask them as well. The thing that you want to do is take and find out how heavy that bike is. And I think that's one of the reasons that a lot of people come out and say, I bought the wrong bike. I need to buy my second e-bike, and I should have bought that the first time. So, because I've seen a lot of people that have gone out and bought an e-bike, they just went and bought it online, they get it, and all of a sudden they find out that it's 80 some pounds. And they can't lift it. They're riding it. If they have problems with it, it's hard for them to navigate. So you want to make sure that you can buy and get an e-bike that is easy for you to work with. How far can you ride? They all have different ranges, and they're basically based on the battery size and your motor size and the weight of the bike, of course, what weight you're going to be carrying on the bike as well, and any other conditions. Okay, the maximum range on my e-bike, for example, which is the Trek Elant over here, that one has a standard mileage rate or range of about 55 to 60 miles with one battery. And if you're going uphill or going into wind, that can be cut down. I know that I went on a ride last fall, and I went like 18, 20 miles, and the range went from 60 down to 20. I turned and I was going into a headwind. When I turned and I was going the opposite direction, I got a tailwind. My estimated range actually increased while I was riding. So it really all depends. A couple of factors there is watching your range a little bit, but watching your battery capacity is another thing. Okay, what happens when you run out of power? And I've done that. Well, the bike I have has 10 speeds as well. So with the extra gearing, I'm able to take and actually ride without. Am I going to be going as fast? No. But at least I can still ride a bike as a regular bike. It is heavier, but you can still do it. Okay, and then there's hauling and transport options. How are you going to take and carry your bike from your home to wherever you want to start? So, what kind of racks can you get and that you should be looking at? Batteries. There are internal batteries, there are removable batteries, and there's range extender batteries. And basically, you really want to find out some of the things about use and care and how you should store the battery. For example, storing an e-bike out in, let's say, a detached garage that's unheated, or a storage shed that's unheated, the battery should not be out there over winter in sub-zero cold in this area. So like my e-bike, I take the batteries and I leave them inside the house. My wife's bike, on the other hand, this Townie, actually has the battery that's internal. And I can remove it, but it is work. So it's not easily removed, so I actually have that stored in my garage, which is part of my house, which doesn't get really that cold. It's maybe 40, 50 degrees, so that's fine for that particular thing. Then you should ask your bike shop about servicing. Basic service, electronic service. There's firmware updates to the computers that are on these bikes. So sometimes those things are worthwhile actually getting done. So definitely talk to them about servicing. That's why it's always nice to take and buy from a local bike shop, because then they're also very skilled and knowledgeable in terms of servicing that particular bike. Then the other thing is looking for security. You really need to get a lock for your bike, and the one that I actually have that I carry along with me for different things, this is a U-lock. It's got a very high security rating, which means it's going to take a long time for a thief to take and break it if they can. It's one of the best locks that are on the market. Cable locks, for example, I've seen those. Cable cutters, boom, within a couple of seconds. So security is one of the things that is very critical for you to consider, and it's really location, where you're storing the bike, the visibility of the bike when it's stored that's out of sight, that you have to lock it up, and the time away from the bike. So those are some of the key issues there, but also the security of the lock. And if you have more than one lock, if the bike looks like, hey, it's hard to take, thieves are going to move on. So that's the whole point of getting good security. Well, what would you do to take and actually do more research for a bike? Well, do the generic research on articles versus, and I would get, from, let's say, biking magazines or other review sites. The stuff that you would see from a manufacturer to a certain extent, the brands themselves, quite frankly, you're going to end up getting, let's say, some PR from them more so than valuable information. Look for reviews, what people are saying about their bikes. It's one way to educate yourself, to find out what other people are talking about. That's sort of where I've heard about people that have bought these bikes and say, oh, it's too heavy, or this bike is great for me. I love the step-through kind of features. So there's all those different things that you need to look at and consider. Social media. Social media is a source. There's a lot of Facebook groups that are out there. There's other groups, other ways to take and find it. And YouTube is a great resource. You'll get a lot of people that will actually put reviews on their e-bikes out there so that you can actually educate yourself as to some of the things that they have found out that you may be interested in. Okay, there's other considerations in terms of e-bikes, such as mid-motor design, okay? My Elant is a mid-motor bike. That happens to be more balanced, might be quieter than some of the other bikes. Smooth power shifting. Those bikes tend to start above $3,000 and go up. So that's one of the factors. So what's your budget, okay? Then you get into, let's say, a rear hub design, such as the Townie over here. Sometimes they provide a surge. My wife actually likes that bike. She has not seen that. That bike has a great sensor in there, and I'll talk about that. But those bikes generally are going to be $2,500 and less. So that's one of the things that you want to look at as well. Now, what kind of sensors? So ask those questions when you get to the bike shop. What kind of sensor does this bike have? And really what you should be looking for is a torque sensor, because that way the bike motor will actually sense when you're putting pressure, how much torque you're putting onto the cranks, and that way it'll give you just that much extra power to the back wheel to operate. So there's torque and cadence sensors. cadence is basically just how many revolutions. And a lot of times bikes will use both, which is good. If you only get a cadence sensor, it's probably not as good a choice, only because a cadence will not tell the motor how much effort you're putting into it to actually add to your effort in there. Gearing, okay. A lot of them have like extra gears on it. I have a 10-speed, a lot of them are 5, 7 speed, external with a rear derailleur, standard kind of bike stuff. There are some that have internal gearing inside the rear hub with the motor. That's another factor. You may not be able to find those as easy, but that's also another option. Sometimes there's no extra gearing, okay? And they just rely upon the assist levels that the bike actually offers. Those are going to be your basic bargain type, starter type bikes. Then the other thing is the kind of drive, okay? Most all the bikes come with a chain type drive. There are some that have an internal geared hub that will have a belt. So it'll have a fiber belt to it, which is obviously a little less maintenance. And they work very, very well. Other kind of a consideration would be, is the bike folding? A lot of folding bikes are 20-inch tires or around 20-inch tires in size. So they're a little bit smaller and a little bit more compact, and they can actually fit inside your vehicle. So that's an option. There are also some full-size 26, 27-inch folding bikes as well. One of the factors with a folding bike is that when you take and fold it, you can actually pull the battery out of the tube, and that'll lighten your weight on the bike, so you make it a little bit easier for you to take and put into the bike. Because these bikes usually weigh 40 pounds or more. And that's one of the things that you have to factor. Okay, and then if you need to take and buy a trailer, haul let's say gear, if you're actually going out and doing bike touring, where you want to take and haul some extra gear in a trailer. You can do that with any of the bikes. Obviously that's going to add weight to what the motor's actually going to expend, so therefore your range is going to be cut down a little bit. Or get a pet hauler. I have one for my bike, which basically I have for my dog, that when we go out together, my wife and I, and we take the dog with us, we can all ride together. So how do you take and haul your bike? Well, some people would want to take and put it inside their vehicle, which is great for the folding bikes. There's obviously weight that you have to consider. How heavy is the bike to be able to put it in your car? And then there's non-folding bikes that maybe you want to put in your car. And sometimes you'd have to, like on an SUV, you'd have to take off the front wheel. Well, how hard is it to take the front wheel off and then lift the rest of the bike and put it in the car? So those are some of the options. But outside your vehicle, you're going to be looking at trailer bike racks that usually go on a trailer hitch. And most all of them are going to be a 2-inch receiver, because it needs that extra size to take and handle the weight of the bike as well as the bike rack itself. And so you're going to have to look for load capacity. And fortunately, my bikes are without the batteries, and one of them it's about 48 pounds and the other bike is 44 pounds. So basically, if I have a bike rack that can handle 100 pounds or thereabouts, my bikes will work. But if your bike is going to be 60 pounds, you're going to need to make sure your bike rack can actually handle that. Okay, and then whether or not it's easy to load. Okay, my rack, I can lift the bikes and put them onto the rack very easily. Some of the heavier bikes, and maybe you want to take and have one that you can take and have a ramp. They have little detachable ramps that you can actually walk your e-bike up and put into the bike rack. So that's really another option that you can look at and consider. And then make sure that the rack that you have, the attachments can hold it down. For example, bikes that have fenders, not all the racks actually work very well with that. So you want to make sure that you can get a rack that can work with your bike that has fenders with it. The other thing is wheel size. Wheel sizes on e-bikes range from 1.5 inches all the way up to 4.5, maybe 5 inches wide. So you want to make sure that your bike rack is capable of handling that. And then some people may think, well, I can use a trunk mount e-bike. Some of those e-bikes that, some of the bike racks that you may have used years ago with your standard bike, that you have a bike rack that you just mount on your trunk and strap to your car. Not with an e-bike. They just can't handle the weight. So you have to rule that out. Where can you ride an e-bike? All right. Most anywhere you can ride a regular bike, roads, trails, etc. But it also can depend upon the location and the local laws that you run across. And there are differences for Class 1, Class 2, and Class 3. For example, Class 1 generally is going to be available just about anywhere, all right? But Class 2, because it has a throttle, may be considered a motor vehicle in some jurisdictions, so that would not be allowed. What I would recommend if you got a Class 2 is just don't use the throttle when you're riding in those particular areas. And Class 3 is because of the speed. Speed limit is up to 28 miles an hour. And that is the question. Are there speed limits on trails? Well, yes or no. A lot of times they're not posted. In the greater Omaha area, you don't see it, but it's sort of understood that it's 20 miles an hour. That's one thing that the Park Service actually has jurisdiction over. When I was out east this last year, I rode the Mount Vernon Trail, which is actually controlled by the National Park Service. And there is a speed limit there for all bikes, 15 miles an hour. So that's one of the things that you have to be concerned about. The other thing, too, is that there's some national forests where e-bikes are not even allowed. So you really have to be aware of where you can or cannot use your e-bike. So, as far as e-bikes concerned, this is just like the tip of the iceberg. There's so much information out there. I encourage you to do your research. If you have any questions, I encourage you to take and go out to my website, heartlandcyclingnetwork.com, and just ask a question on the forum, and I'll get back to you with some pointers. I will also have a page on the website just about e-bikes. There'll be some helpful links on the page as well, along with this particular video and some other videos that I may find that would be helpful for you for anybody looking for an e-bike. So anyhow, I encourage you to look into it. It is a great way to get out there, especially if you were not able to get out and ride otherwise. An e-bike is, to me, a freedom machine. And it's worthwhile doing and looking into, and go out and have fun. That's really what it's all about. So I encourage you to get out there and ride and pedal on.